Well, hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we look at the previous week in the world of football and or soccer and tackle the things that we thought were interesting. I'm Tom Rennie. Alongside me is MLS Apple broadcaster, legendary Sirius XM FC host, and the man who scored, was it the first ever goal in the history of Real Salt Lake? I think there's a second one, but there's no way of knowing. It is Mr. Brian Dunny Dunseth. How are you, mate? You all right?
I'm fantastic. I'm crying laughing because Horsey already this show up. Sorry, Tim. I mean, we couldn't even get through the open, and
so
Horsey
annoying.
already. It's so annoying.
I nailed the opener as well. Like, you
so
enjoyed
good.
this opener. You enjoyed the way I made it sound really professional and loose as we came into the program.
Yeah.
The one that never got recorded, Dunny. That was maybe my best work.
Spectac, some would say. Spectac. By the way, have you ever come across an old computer? Like one of your old computers?
Yes, in my garage right now, which I'm in the process of gradually clearing out whenever my wife tells me to do something. I have the laptop that I wrote my dissertation on at university. Which my dissertation was on. I wrote two. One of them was about Winston Churchill and whether he could be considered a British hero, and the other one was whether the iPod was going to change humanity.
Oh, well, kind of.
But the trouble is, the Churchill one went down really, really well, but the iPod one was actually not even slightly on topic. But the topic was so boring to me, I wrote something I thought was interesting, and it's so I didn't get as high a mark as I should have got because of my massive intelligence. Why do you ask?
Well, because I came across one of my computers from back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working on a house, my mother-in-law's house that passed away. We're working through her house. We're down to the wire. We've got about 3.5 weeks left before we've got to get off the pot, as they say. Sorry, Tim. Because we got to make a decision between our house and her house and what we're going to do. Are we going to move? Are we going to get away? If we have a pool here, that one's got a kind of a crazy driveway, but there's history and there's whatever. So I'm going through. I find my computer. My computer is probably 15 years old. It was the last PC that I had bought and purchased before I made the move over to Apple, before I decided to go with the MacBook. And so, by the way, remembering like your password from 15 years ago, kind of wild. Fired it up the very first time. I hit it. I don't know how with all the concussions. I don't know how I can remember like random 80s hip hop music and all the lyrics, but I'll walk into a kitchen and forget why I'm there. Like, I've got no idea. So I've got empty space in my brain for stupid stuff that I keep holding on to. And I fired up the laptop.
Mm-hmm.
I came across so many incredible photos.
Yeah?
So many incriminating and incredible photos. And I'm sitting there and like my kids are kind of near me and my wife's near me. But this is kind of the phase of like single Dunny.
They weren't around. You haven't got to feel bad about those days.
Dating Jade Dunny, married Jade Dunny, and still to yet have kids. But that phase of life.
The great times.
Oh, dude, I started sending these pictures to my friends and the bat phone was just lit up for about an hour. And I had a drink in me. So I was having fun. We were laughing and we were telling stories and like showing my kids certain things. I had a bunch of like playing pictures back in the day.
Certain things.
And it was, but then like my wife's like, why are you laughing so hard? Because my phone just keeps going and I'm laughing at storytelling. There's a picture of me on my buddy Art and he's got like highlights in his hair and he's wearing a leather jacket and the jokes start coming in with me and Art and Higgins about what happened at a mall in Azusa, like just crazy stuff. So if you come across, it's just a memory thing. So if you ever come across a laptop, you'll probably realize you made some horrible decisions. You'll probably, it'll capture the imagination of and reimagine or re-story tell all of these incredible things that happened in your life 15, 20 years ago. But I thought it was really cool. And I'm a guy who throws everything away. I throw everything away. I have zero attachment to anything. Any of the stuff that I have, bend it, burn it. I don't care. I'm totally fine. Now I'm having a few regrets. Because
I keep your pictures. Have to keep your pictures. That's the most important thing. I've got some pictures in the garage of a holiday I took with like my friends when I was 16, which I don't think I've looked at since I was 16. And every time I see them in the garage, I think I should probably either look at them or throw them. I think, no, I can't. I cannot throw them. And I don't know how attractive the girl I kissed in Cocktails and Dreams was. She could have been incredible. And she could have been even better than that. There's no way of knowing.
Yeah.
I'm never going to look at the picture. Maybe one day in many, many years from now. Yeah. I thought that was a good save. Do you know what, though? In the subject of reminiscing before we get to the football. Yeah, we had a little kiss, little kissy kisso. And Jenny. And the thing is that this week I went out. I went at the West Ham game, watching the West Ham game with kind of my family and all these boys that are my nephews who are like 12 or whatever, 12, 14 and 9, I think they are. The oldest one, he's addressing himself now, a little bit older, and flared jeans are back. So not like full flares, but when I was like in like university, like 18, 19, the trousers that kind of flared open at the bottom were very cool. And then as the years went on, they became drain pipes quite quickly in this sort of era. They went from flares to drain pipes in about 6 months. And I've sort of worn drain pipe trousers ever since, because when you pick a pair of jeans, you stick with them. In real life, yeah. Levi's 511s, keep stuck. But then I said to him, "Oh, you got the flared trousers?" He was like, "Yeah, everyone's wearing them." I was like, "Yeah." So now you're old enough to go into urinals. What you'll notice is your trousers are basically going to mop all the urine off every toilet you go into. 100%. And until you start coming home and thinking, "Oh, I'll wear them jeans again the next day," and you think, "Oh, what's that smell of ammonia that I'm getting?" And you realize it's your own trousers. That's when you stop wearing the flared jeans. So he's got to discover that for himself. But I remember coming home in the morning and going, "Oh, did I piss myself?" And it was like, no, it was my trousers.
The trough that overflows, and it's all over the bottom of your feet. Ugh.
We are overflowing right now with enthusiasm. Great segue for Tottenham Hotspur. Following, why not? Liverpool for them this weekend in the Premier League, the late game on Saturday. The weekend just gone was the 2-2 draw at Emirates Stadium, North London derby. I went to the game, and it was a really terrific game of football, I've got to say. Lots of great drama, lots of deficiencies with both teams that I thought were quite interesting. We're a couple of days on, but I thought I'd just pick out a couple of things, Dunny, from the game and a couple of talking points from it. But starting with Tottenham Hotspur, I'd love your view on how they played and how they're getting on, because we had a conversation last week about they ain't really played anyone. They played Bournemouth, they played Burnley, they played a pretty poor Manchester United, and you're a bit like, it's good this Angeball, but if they go toe-to-toe with Arsenal and try and take them on at their own game, they're going to get stuffed. And, I am in the business to a degree. I mean, I do get paid to do it, of predictions. You wouldn't know that from our Around the Grounds challenges. But I do get paid by a gambling company to do predictions, and I've been doing that sort of thing for a long time. It keeps my kids in shoes. And I'm normally pretty good. But I got to tell you, I got this one totally off. I never saw a scenario, though it's the North London derby, and derbies have that anomalous factor about them. I never saw Tottenham being the strongest team level in the game heading towards the end of it. And I was delightfully surprised in a way by how good Tottenham were and how daring Tottenham were. And I was really impressed by them. What about you?
I was. I would be intrigued to have the access of an Amazon All or Nothing in a season like this, because I know we joke around about that a lot. I just think what Ange Postecoglou has done, nobody really knew. Nobody still really knows, right? What he did at Celtic is a great job, but Brendan Rodgers did a great job at Celtic. And there's been a bunch of guys that have done a great job at Celtic, but it doesn't always translate when you take that next step. And for Postecoglou going into a club that, you've got the legend of Pochettino, you have the legend of Jose Mourinho, you have the legend of Nuno. No, you don't have the legend of Nuno Espirito Santo, but you have
he did beat Man City. That is a legendary thing to have done.
That's true. He was manager of the month before you pinned him like 6 weeks later.
Until they got mullered in this actual game. And I was at it when they beat them, I think 3-0, and just destroyed them. It was delirium that day.
Yeah, it really was. And then, you go to the Antonio Conte situation. So to follow up personalities like that, you've got to have a personality yourself. And it was interesting. I was texting. I've got I call it the Tottenham Lunacy Group. And it's Gabe Ortiz, former producer at SiriusXM, and it's Headley up in Detroit. And we're on this text stream, and it's a lot of trash talking. But there was a lot of hope for this season. Obviously, the loss of Harry Kane and dealing with that, and how were they going to replace them? Was it going to be individual? Was Richarlison going to be the man? How were they going to kind of retool with Postecoglou ball? But I really think that it's not just the manager that's doing a fantastic job. James Maddison fits this team perfectly.
Mm.
And what he's doing, as long as he stays healthy, they've got a real shot at qualifying for Champions League this season. And I'm really, really intrigued to see the evolution, and good to see Heung-min Son back to full fitness after knowing now what we didn't know then was that he was dealing with a pretty serious complaint fitness-wise through a majority of the season. And he didn't look himself.
No.
But then also, I think it's more of a collective as opposed to an individual when you're talking about the replacement for Harry Kane. And they've got that bite. They've got that personality. They're continuing to evolve to see exactly what it looks like. I'm still going to wonder what it's going to be like when this team is stretched a little bit, when we're talking about the physicality of a Premier League season and what it looks like when they're dealing with a couple of significant injuries, because as always, there's going to be significant injuries that you're going to have to overcome. But I like the fight. I like the passion. I like the desire. They can speed it up. They can slow it down. They can hit in the transition. They can be a little bit more methodical. I won't bring up that the handball was almost an exact replica of what we saw against Manchester United.
Oh, don't
that
do it.
wasn't called a penalty, but this one was. I'm not going to.
You're right to mention it, though. Look, we can't do it for the full show because it's so annoying.
Yeah.
But Postecoglou said afterwards, and it was so... I was in the press comments afterwards. It was terrific. It's the first time I've been that close to him. And he said, someone was like, what do you think of the handball? He was like, mate, I don't know, mate. I ain't got a clue what the handball rule is, mate. There's no way of knowing, mate.
Yeah.
And he's absolutely right. I mean, I actually think it was a penalty. As you know, I think the Man United one was a penalty, but we can't.
Yeah. Then, from the Arsenal perspective, this was a really interesting one. So I've watched the aftermath, right, and the fallout. And you and I were at the All-Star game. It's a different element when Arsenal's in a preseason mode, when they're expected to win and be comfortable in winning. And, the personality of Mikel Arteta, pensive, nervous, animated, on edge. That's not what we saw up close and personal, right? That day at Audi Field against the MLS All-Stars, it was very comfortable and relaxed, but he still wanted certain elements of his game model executed on the day. What I continue to notice about the evolution of Mikel Arteta as a manager is he gets I don't want to say antsy, but you can almost feel like the former player come out in him in some of these games. And whether it's against Man City or it's against Liverpool or it's in a game like this in North London Derby, he becomes more animated. And as he becomes more animated, it's that one, that the meme that we had last year with the referee, like doing that to the referee, the fourth official. Like he starts to, I don't want to say he loses control, but it's almost as if, from my point of view, he realizes that he can't affect the game other than close down space, play the ball through, let's go. He's trying to have a little bit more sense of accountability and influence on the game, but he knows he can't play. And I just wonder if there's a moment, and this is on the players, right? It's not on the manager, but if there's a moment where the players start to get a little bit more antsy because of the actions of the manager. And we've seen it. We've seen how the influence of managers has affected the game and affected the players. And it's almost like they tighten up a little bit as opposed to being a little bit more looser and confident. So it was just something that it's interesting. I kind of noticed. I started to think about a little bit more, and who knows? But I just, when I see managers get a little bit more like excited / frustrated / their personality, blustery personality starts, I just wonder what the players look like. Obviously Declan Rice going out with whatever type of injury that he's dealing with or back issue that he's dealing with, you can see the frustration on his face. That's a huge loss. The fact that Jorginho's turnover immediately Steven Gerrard's the game back into the hands of Sonny, and is that still too soon? Is that
no? It's good. You know what? That's the first I'd heard that, and I wish I'd used it more liberally for the last 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was decent. And then finally, I really wonder what this looks like for Kai Havertz. That was tactical,
Dunny. He said afterwards that Rice was an injury, and so what are you going to do? Jorginho's the obvious replacement. The Fabio Vieira for Havertz was a tactical change he decided to make. it was one of those things where I actually said to the guy at Perry Groves next to me, I said to him, I actually hadn't realised when he got booked, I was like, oh yeah, they brought him on. That was about the 70th minute. I mean, that's a hell of a show of faith in someone that is just, I'm not going to say keeps letting him down, but he's not doing anything.
Well, there's a reason why he didn't start, right? There's a reason why. And we can talk about fatigue and we talk about tactics and we talk about shape and identity and all this stuff, but it's starting to become more of an issue. And we were intrigued when he left Chelsea to say, well, okay, Arteta has a plan for him. He's got a vision for him. He's got something that he's looking at Kai Havertz and saying, player profile, size, strength, ability, but he's going to play in this position. And it's this, like, until we kind of really figure it out, and I don't know if we ever will, it comes back to my same question with Kai Havertz since he was at Bayer Leverkusen as a teenager when I used to call the Europa League games. You can tell he's a phenomenal player. You can tell that his player profile, his size, his distribution, right foot, left foot, heading ability, he can play. I just don't know what his best position is. And with the way that Arteta is playing, that little right-hand side, that triangle point down on that left-hand side, Odegaard's on the right. I don't know. I don't think it's clear whatsoever that Kai Havertz is on that left-hand side of that triangle down in the midfield right now with Declan Rice underneath him. It's a big question mark in this Arsenal side, but they're obviously disappointed. We'll do the whataboutery, as you say, if Jorginho doesn't get stripped in a positional moment where he's so good and so simplistic with his passing, sideways, backwards, keep possession, all that stuff, to get stripped in that moment is so uncharacteristically like Jorginho. But again, I think for me, there's a response mechanism that's happening with Tottenham. And that response mechanism is down to the manager's mentality and how he has collectively, I think almost, I don't know if rebranded is the right word, but they certainly have to a certain extent doing it without Harry Kane.
So many interesting points to pick up from that. And I do want to move on to some other stories in a minute, but I'll just mention a couple of bits off the back of it, which I think are interesting, and a couple of bits for you, which I think you'll like. The James Maddison of it all. I just love James Maddison. And because we had the Declan Rice conversation a lot and about him leaving my team to go to a temporarily top 4 team, a frustrating thing to happen. But you get this from Leicester fans now. Oh, that great player we've had for years. You're just suddenly noticing how great he is. Well, Leicester fans, I'm a Maddison stan, all right? I've been saying for a long time how incredibly good he is. And he was superb in the game. Links everything Tottenham are doing together fantastically well. But in terms of Arsenal, the Jorginho thing is interesting. And tactically, I love it when you tell us a bit about the tactics of the game. And what I thought was interesting about this, and I'd like to get a follow-up from you on, is Declan Rice is one of those guys, and we read out the stats when he left West Ham compared to Thomas Souček. I haven't got him in front of me now, but he was doing like 60% of Souček's running plus his running. He was covering Paqueta's running. He was almost like a spirograph. And he's around the field. Like if you will look at a spirograph from a cricket match and the way a player shoots offside and leg side and it goes all around and he does this incredible work everywhere. Jorginho is not that. I agree with you. I think Jorginho is a good player, very good player. I think you can see at Chelsea right now replacing Jorginho with Enzo Fernandez has added nothing because I think Jorginho was underrated and Enzo Fernandez is overrated and they're very good at sideways passing. It's a very important thing. And Jorginho took a lot of grief for it. But Jorginho's not going to do your work. He's not going to do his work. He's not going to press forward. He's not going to come back. And it didn't quite lead to the goal because that was a blind Steven Gerrard panic moment. But when you make that change, Dunny, the team is already built around Declan Rice. The team is already built around him being able to do 3 or 4 jobs for that team. When Jorginho comes on unplanned, I wonder if Arteta could go back in time now and be like, actually, I've got to change the makeup of my midfield and not continue to allow one guy to do all those jobs and maybe not bring on Kai Havertz and keep Fabio Vieira on, drop 2 players deeper. It felt to me like he got the tactics wrong. And when that changed, not only do you lose the presence of Declan Rice, it also means the old format of the team doesn't work. And he didn't seem to respond to that, I don't think.
Well, I think there's one point, and again, these players are not available. but I have a tough time believing Jorginho's comes in if Thomas Partey is available.
Sure.
I have a tough time thinking that Kai Havertz is coming in if Trossard is available. I don't even know. And if Martinelli is available, you would say Nketiah doesn't start. Jesus is at the top of the point of the attack, the spearhead of the attack. Martinelli's on the left-hand side. Trossard's probably internal. And then if you lose Declan Rice, then you can drop Partey in if he's not in your starting 11. I would also say that Gabriel's probably not in the starting 11 if Timber is available at this stage. So all of these things, again, we talked about for Spurs a few minutes ago. I'm intrigued to see what they look like without a couple of important players. Right now, Arsenal is without a couple of important players. I still think the loss of Timber to that ACL injury is just devastating because he was going to play such a huge role and brought such a different level of athleticism across that back line that was needed. And again, you think about him, you think about David Ray, you think about Declan Rice, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, they put a bunch of pieces of the puzzle together in 2 seasons, 4 transfer windows, and all of a sudden this team is a really dynamic top 4 solidified team. But yeah, there's no argument for me, none whatsoever, when you're talking about, I don't think he necessarily got it wrong. I think it only probably solidified the issue that Arsenal had heading into the offseason, which is, to your point, Jorginho is still a fantastic player, but you are losing some of that athleticism that is going to be there if you have insert name here, because he's more of a simplistic disrupt, destroy, not necessarily get dragged out, but play simple. He's a beautiful player. Like, he is a fantastic player, even at this stage of his career. And I don't think we're having this conversation had he not got stripped, but we're focusing on it because the scoreline's 2-2. He gets stripped. The focus is Declan Rice is so much better than Jorginho at this stage of their careers. And now it looks like a significant drop off because now we know what they look like. And by the way, to your point on Maddison really quick, when people say like, oh, now you're just noticing, well, the same thing happened with Jack Grealish. We noticed Jack Grealish in his second season at Man City because he's playing in the same style and the same degree all of a sudden with world-class players. Maddison, he's added elements to this team that were missing, that he did do well at Leicester City, but during that 3-year decline, we weren't focused on them being a contender in any way, shape, or form. Now you're saying, well, this Tottenham team has every right to be in a top 4 finish.
Yeah. I want to find a bit on that as well. I did think about you at the weekend. Not then. Yes, then, but that's not what I'm talking about now. When Saka scores and does Maddison's dart throwing celebration, and then Maddison then sets up Son's first goal, sets them both up. But when he sets up the first goal, he turns Bukayo Saka, and he was asked, I don't know if you saw this, it was magnificent Dunsethery. Someone said to him, what do you make about Saka? Oh, they're mates at England or whatever. He said, what do you make of doing his celebration? You doing your celebration? He said he must have still been doing it when I set out the first goal, when I turned him, which was just says everything about Maddison. He nailed it. He nailed the comment. It's still funny. He didn't hammer it so hard that it was, obnoxious or whatever. Just a perfect comment. Yeah, I bow to no one in my love for James Maddison.
By the way, did Gabriel tweet this week? I missed it. No?
Nice kick about with the lads, Gabriel, wherever you are. Harry Kane missing, we know this. Scored a hat-trick for Bayern Munich this weekend. I feel like I knew this about German football. I don't know if you did. It don't count as a hat-trick in Germany that he scored 3 goals in the 7-0 victory. Did you know this?
No.
That in German football, so for most of us, for the normal people out there, you score 3 goals in a game, it's a hat-trick. But in Germany, it doesn't count as a hat-trick, and I don't know what this means. If you don't get the match ball, you don't get the little trophy or whatever, unless you score the goals consecutively. So because there were different scorers between his first and second goal, and one between his second and third, officially in Germany, it does not count as a hat-trick. They do not recognize 3 goals as a hat-trick unless you do it consecutively in the game. Isn't that just bullshit? Sorry, Tim.
Yes. Oh, the Germans. I mean, I did not know that. I don't understand it, but yeah. Okay.
God bless you. God bless you, Germany. A little bit of Man United. The good thing about Man United, we spoke about this on Friday's Grumpy Pundits on Sirius XM FC, that it don't matter how you win, just win. And they did. And what an incredible goal, by the way. You got to say, it's I was doing the commentary of the game, and it was one of those moments where you were just so happy to see it live. Incredible goal, incredible finish. But away from that, the whole perennial perma-crisis, I kept calling it little fires everywhere on Saturday, which I was very happy with. That's kind of what's going on with Man U right now. You win and the flames are doused temporarily. So we come back on Tuesday. It's before their Moose Cup game against Crystal Palace. And this Jadon Sancho story, the latest element of it, pops its head up. Sancho banned from first team facilities at Manchester United, exiled star, not even allowed to dine with senior players. He can only eat on site with academy players. There was some story I read, it may have been a joke, about him not even be allowed in the senior car park. The PFA, the Professional Football Association, or Players Football Association, anyway, the Players Union, are offering to be an arbiter between Ten Hag and Sancho to try and come to a resolution on this. And we've spoken about this before, Dunny, and we don't quite land in the same place on it. But either way, it's been 3 weeks, right? It's been 3 weeks. You've had your little blow up. You've had your little, here's my authority, listen or don't moment. Sancho's now deleted his social media. We're going to knock this on the head now. Don't we knock this on the head and move on now?
Yeah. By the way, Chelsea's got to be just thanking their lucky stars that all this stuff's coming out with Manchester United. Just so the constant deflection of how fucking terrible it is at Chelsea. Sorry, Tim, right now. Again, I listened to it this morning. I listened to the question. I listened to the answer from Erik ten Hag about Jadon Sancho, talking about standards and talk about training and why he wasn't included in the game day roster. And then I watched the performance of Hannibal. I mean, I think Garnacho.
Very good. Hannibal,
I'm telling you, the last 3 appearances he's had in all competitions, he's been coming off the bench and winding people up and getting after it. Sorry, Tim. He's been incredibly dynamic. Should have had a goal at the weekend as well. And I just think he plays the game really, really well. He is all over there. I mean, he is all over the field, flying. And so when I'm watching this, and I think about Garnacho, right? Rashford's undroppable. Anthony's obviously not available. Again, as a former player, I'm kind of trying to read between the lines. I'm trying to understand what's happened. And I hear the manager very, very simply say, he's not training well. He's not at the standard that we expect. He's not on the game day roster. That's it. That's all he says. Nothing more, nothing less. He didn't offer up the information. He was asked specifically why the England international, who has not come anywhere close to hitting the form that was expected when he came to Manchester United, is not involved. That tells me something. So then the player gets involved, right? And the player personality, and we've talked about this, and it was one of the big things that Jose Mourinho really struggled with at Manchester United, going back to his tenure, is that the things inside the locker room that were the Didier Drogba, Frank Lampard, John Terry-esque, Ricardo Carvalho, that type of timeline, everything was in the locker room, and it was the club and the manager made their statements. And then if the player decided to respond in an interview or tried to leak to the press, it was very clear what was happening. Well, now players have every right to go out publicly and tell their side of the story. They have their social media. They don't have to go through a PR person. They don't have to go through their company. They can just go straight to the public forum. The problem is you're an employee, right? The problem is you are a player. The problem is you are an individual within the collective, and there are expectations. And if you go out there and if you decide to do what Jadon Sancho does, all credit to him. You stood up for yourself. You had your say. You decided that you weren't going to take this. You decided that the manager had thrown you under the bus. So you're going to respond. I got no problem with it whatsoever. But I also understand there's consequences. And if there's consequences, in the same manner we watched Cristiano Ronaldo leave the club, the same manner we saw Marcus Rashford dropped from the starting 11 in probably his greatest run of form in recent times because he overslept and missed the meeting by 30 seconds, there's a level of accountability. And the accountability then turns to, okay, what's the punishment? And I would assume for everyone that's like, well, Erik ten Hag's got to be nice. again, you go back to what happened a year ago. I think Erik ten Hag handled it really, really well. Whatever was going on the mental side outside of football with Jadon Sancho at that moment, the fact that Jadon Sancho spends a couple weeks over in Holland, the Netherlands, rehabilitates himself, whether on the field or off the field, to get himself to the point where he comes back to the club, standing ovation, comes back on the field, everything's great. There's still a human side to Erik ten Hag. I think he's smart enough to recognize that these human beings are human beings, but they're also players. But this is where I have an issue with this. You can be a human being and you can treat everyone with kid gloves. There's guys that are going to be the Anthony situation. There's guys going to be the Mason Greenwood situation. There's guys going to be the Harry Maguire situations in Greece. There's guys going to be in a situation where they've cheated on their wife's cheated on them, their mother's passed away, their partner's gone, like they've missed weddings, they've missed births, all of these things. You can be sympathetic. But the moment that you step over the line and you step on the field, there's accountability. And the accountability is your performance. We've talked about this forever. There's no God-given right. You do not have a divine right to put your boots on, step on the field, and be like, I'm a starter. Look who I am. I'm a starter. No, you win your spot. And for all of these other players that are there, whether you talk about Pellistri, you talk about Hannibal, you talk about Garnacho, you talk about Anthony, you talk about Anthony Martial, you talk about Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho has to compete. That's 7 guys for 2 positions. He has to show every single day to the coaching staff, to the manager, to his teammates, that he is better than the player that's in front of them. That's what it comes down to, pure and simple. So if you don't show that and you think the manager's a dick, sorry, Tim, well, that's fine. That's up to you. But every single one of us as players will know that if it gets in a pissing contest and you've just watched Cristiano Ronaldo leave the club because he was going to lose the pissing contest with Erik ten Hag, that should tell you that, mate, Jadon, maybe you should apologize. You know what? I should have been smarter. I shouldn't have pressed send. I should have typed it out, got my frustrations out, deleted it, put my phone away. That was not the place or time, because his performances will change the mind of Erik ten Hag. And that then subsequently will see him playing more minutes in a more significant role, a more important role. And then he can prove that he's the player that we all think he's capable of being, but he hasn't shown yet. So the whole messaging of, well, he's not with the first team.
Yeah, what about that? What about the fact that he's not allowed to eat with the senior players? And there's a story that there was a barbecue that Ten Hag threw for players and their families, and he's not there at that as well. There's team bonding going on without him. Is that pointed at him?
No. So I just watched this happen out here in Salt Lake, at Real Salt Lake. Danny Musovski is a player for Real Salt Lake that chose to not show up for the team. He's in a contract dispute. He felt as though there was he and his agent felt as though there was an agreement, a structure of a contract. The contract offer did not come ultimately. And then he decided he was going to stand up for himself and make himself unavailable for the team. He pulled himself effectively out of 3.5 weeks of training. So based on the MLSPA, the Players Association, and the agreement between the league and the teams and the Players Association, Real Salt Lake, even though he literally has signed a contract, is getting paid for his contract, and still getting paid through this entire timeline, Real Salt Lake still has to provide for him a training facility and a training ground that's worthy of him to be able to train at a level that, should he come back, he can be integrated back in the squad. So Real Salt Lake would train in the mornings. Danny would come in the afternoons. He still had access to everything, but he was not around the team. So this is something that happens all over the world. These are again consequences because of the actions of the players. So if you're not around the team and you're not around the meals and all of this, basically what they're saying without saying is that he's training on the opposite schedule of what Man United's first team's training. So if they're in the morning, he's in the afternoon. If they're in the afternoon, he's in the morning. He'll still have the same access to the trainers, rehabilitation, strength and conditioning, still have access to food, all of those things. He's just not with the first team. So again, the consequences of his actions are very clear. That is the punishment. Until you decide to make things right based on his actions of tweeting or Instagramming, whatever it was, well, then he's going to be on the outside looking in of the first team. Because why would Erik ten Hag want that distraction If he's setting the tone, setting the culture, and setting the parameters of this is where we're going to work, this is how we're going to work, this is what I expect from you to work. If you cannot do that, you will not be a part of this. Because you can't have guys that are, displaying outwardly, not just to his teammates, but to the world, because you're talking millions and millions and millions of eyeballs just read your statement where you've slagged off the manager. I totally understand the situation.
Yeah, look, I think it's one that will run and we'll come back to it. I mean, the point of it for me, and I want to move on to some other bits before we're out of time today, but the point of it now is that I actually think I agree with you completely the way you phrased it earlier on, that, Sancho's entitled to have his opinion. He'll feel that Ten Hag has thrown him under the bus in his comments at Emirates Stadium. The truth of that is debatable. But I get it for a week. I get a rage quit for a week. I get that. I get having a go at your boss, or like tweeting something inappropriate, or like taking a couple of days off to go fishing and not talk to anyone. I get all of that. I get having a strop, especially when you're a young man in your 20s and things aren't going your way. That's absolutely fine. And I get the punishment and I get all of that. But when we get to this bit and it rumbles on, the way Ten Hag handles it going to be really interesting. But also, and I get this from speaking to you, but also from the countless kind of former footballers that I have worked with, is that you're only a player for so long, sure, but you're a Man United player for such a short amount of time. And for all the fun we have about Man United, this is Manchester United Football Club. It is still Manchester United Football Club. They have signed you, and your life is going to be defined by that. Yeah. Whatever you do next is going to be defined by it. And I just think there's a point, again, I don't know Jadon Sancho personally. I don't know his troubles, but I hope there's a realization at some point very, very soon that he is pissing up the wall the chance to play for Manchester United. And when it's gone, it's going to be gone. And if it goes because you had a row with the manager over something he said or training or whatever, I don't know. I hope he bucks it up soon.
And by the way, on a odd positive note for Manchester United, how crazy was it to see Johnny Evans in the starting 11 and dropping dimes? I mean, diming up Bruno Fernandes. Yeah. Even the goal that got called back because Højlund was in front of the goalkeeper. I mean, talk about like a really cool moment for a guy that got just ruthlessly pushed out the door for no reason at a stage of his career where he still could have helped Manchester United in the center back position before he ended up having a fantastic run at Leicester City. I just think it was when I saw him in the lineup, I was like, really? Yeah. And then all of a sudden you watch him start diming and playing. He got his bell rung. I mean, that was a hell of a performance from.
He's been a top player. It's a great story, and he was pivotal for Leicester for a number of years before his injuries of last season. I mean, you'll recall the last home game they had when he tried to play on like one leg to desperately keep Leicester City up. That's testament to his character and leadership abilities. But yeah, terrific on the night. And I hadn't realised as well, like I was doing the research for the game, 3-time Premier League winner, 1-time Champions League winner. But only on Saturday, it was his 200th Man U appearance. I assumed it would be like 800. I don't know, like a lot more. But he played a lot. But then there was a huge gap, and he's still going. It's a great story. I did just want to mention Arturo Vidal. Hey, Arturo, f*** you. Sorry, Tim. Quote, that coach, Ten Hag, came in badly. How are you going to take Cristiano Ronaldo out? That's how these guys are. He was the top scorer, and he takes him out. These bald guys are very complicated. Hey, Arturo. You. Sorry, Tim.
Isn't he bald, though? I know he's got the mohawk, the baby mohawk, but
he's a fake
bald. As close to being bald as possible.
I mean, I don't tend to comment on people's hair a great deal because I've not had hair for 10 years. And previous to that, I didn't have many terrific haircuts. Though when I first met my now wife, she did use my straighteners. But I don't want to get into that. Things change. But I will say that when the revolution comes, Arturo, when the revolution comes, and it will in the end, the final war will be between the balds and the haired. We shall remember this, buddy. Okay? We're going to remember this. And Dunny's going to be on our team. Looking at him when he takes the hat off, he's gone from 80% to 70%. When you get down to 50 or below, you join our team, buddy. Don't you forget it. He's like 90% forehead.
Look at that head.
To quote the great comedian Harry Hill, Dunny is noticing every single week it's taking longer and longer to wash his face. So eventually, he is going to be on our side, Arturo. So don't you forget it.
Too. Yeah.
Just, an extraordinary comment from someone who can't decide which haircut he wants. Like, I've got no time for you, Arturo.
Good player, though.
Yeah, he's very good. It's just a joke. Don't come for me. Mind you, when the revolution comes, you're mine. Quick one on Newcastle against Sheffield United. Not on the Newcastle side of things because, we spoke about them a lot. They're a good team. Sheffield United, it was their 4,988th game in their history, right? So a long history with certain moments of pride. Their largest ever margin of defeat in 4,988 games. Previously, the margin was 310, a 7-goal margin, a defeat to Middlesbrough in 1933. Dunny, do you know what? I don't know if you've ever been beaten 8-0. I assume not. I presume not. But, you would have been on the end of a few wallopings over the years, as everyone is during their career.
Yeah.
Talk to me a bit about this and how this second half went. Because, watching it from the outside, there's a great moment where they cut to a lady in the stand reading her book at 7-0. And then just absolutely fantastic. It's a line I use in commentary quite a lot when I'm doing a Man City game and it's 2-0 with 40 minutes to go. And I always say, hey, co-commentator, you bought your book. It's going to be tough from this point onwards. And then she did it, which was incredible. I presume she was reading The Places I've Cried in Public by Holly Bourne, or One Shot by Lee Child, the Jack Reacher novel, in the hope her team could have one shot, or maybe For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway, as she desperately hoped for the bell to ring and or whistle to go. But how do you cope with this on the field when there's so long to go, you are so beaten? They added the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, or the 7th, 8th, and 6th, 7th, and 8th quite late on. Certainly the 8th was late on. How do you cope with it, and then how do you recover from it?
Yeah, I thought Tim Howard was spot on when he was talking about it afterwards. He used a reference that was something along the lines of, a chunk of meat, taking your chunk of meat. And what he was basically asking was, where was any of the Sheffield United players that were getting stuck in to send a message? Like, and I have been in some heavy defeats, and you get to the point where, especially as a defender, central defender in particular, you go in arms flying, you go in knees bent, you go in studs up. And it was a different time, obviously. I'm much older, where challenges were much more agreeable. The physicality, you could get away. There was no VAR. There was no replays. Well, I ended up getting suspended for a game for an elbow one time based on a replay. Erik Winalda, Rob Stone, you did me dirty that game. He deserved it, though. He did deserve it. But it was you kicked anything that came around you because it was that bad. And there's times where you couldn't even catch people. You're just chasing shadows. That's what it felt like. But I was more concerned about, this isn't a heck and bottom situation. This is more of like where's the ego? Where's we talk a lot about pride, but this was a full pants down embarrassment for Sheffield United.
Yeah.
And I saw your tweets, your X's.
Oh no!
This is a really poor group right now. Yeah. Burnley, Luton Town, and Sheffield United. And for each year, you kind of feel like maybe one stays up, two potentially stays up. Could all three stay up? But this is not looking good. This is looking horrible. And you kind of almost wonder if this is a moment in time where, well, I would say this next week is going to be a really interesting time for this coaching staff at Sheffield United to figure out if this group of players is going to quit on them. Because it's easier to change the manager than it is to change any of these players, obviously. So who does the manager trust? Who does he have faith in? And what I always say, especially when the game's gotten away from a team, you can tell a lot by their body language. You can tell who the leader is. Like the other day, I'm watching the Everton game. Tarkowski, that's a leader. Yeah. That's a leader for Everton. He's grabbing players, pulling them around. Calvert-Lewin comes in. He's pulling him, saying, no, you got the back stick on corners. Like, he's screaming. Ball goes out of bounds on a deflection. He's having a go. He's getting his pound of flesh from somebody. You can tell that's what they were missing. There was like a rod, come on, boys, let's go. Like, there's that, but they properly got their pants pulled down in front of that entire stadium. And if you're Heckenbottom and you're that coaching staff, if I was a part of it, I would have taken that, 4-minute television clip of Eddie Howe and Newcastle just standing on their field, saluting their fans and just laughing giving each other high fives, pat on the backs, giggling, because that couldn't be more embarrassing for Sheffield United, that what happened on the field and then after the final whistle. That's got to be, I would hope it's hugely disappointing and embarrassing for that group of players.
I mean, a couple of notes on it for me. Number one is that it's West Ham for them on Saturday, so that's a guaranteed 3 points for us. No, probably not. But also, before I did the Man United game at the weekend, I got a kind of text message, team news text message from a football website that I follow, and it was like, injury hit Man United, go to Burnley. That's the kind of thing that must really piss off Sheffield United, because they had 9 players out, including McBurney, who got sent off because he's just an idiot last week. Desperately wants to fight people instead of playing football. And you're a bit like, they didn't have good players to start with. So to have 9 outs is significantly more important than, Jadon Sancho can't train with the first team. So again, it's that bias, more eyes on it, whatever, but it's the kind of thing that does annoy me. But I kept thinking in these scenarios, Dunny, I don't know why it comes to me in this way. One of my favorite films is the Anthony Quinn movie Zorba the Greek, which is based on the life and times of Alexis Zorba, which is it's a really incredible book, but it's really difficult to read because translated books I often find them quite difficult. And it's translated from the Greek into English, and it's from like the 1940s. But there's a bit in the book, and it always comes to me in these moments, because Jamie Carragher was doing the post-match, and he was like, you almost feel a bit like, just stop now, it's 5, just stop, just let it go. And I get that. And I think there's an amazing bit in the book where Madame Hortense, who owns this house where the guy Basil, the main character, is sort of staying, and she gets pneumonia, and she's like dying in this in the room in the hotel. But what happens is, I've never seen anything like this before, and it always baffles me. And I spoke to a couple of Greek friends of mine about it, and whether this is a cultural thing or part of the book. But what happens is, she's a foreigner, right, in the hotel. And so when she's dying in the hotel, what happens is the locals from the island all go to the hotel. And then they go into the hotel, and they go up the stairs in the hotel. And this is gradually over a period of like hours and days, because she's passing away and she's not going to be able to get up. And eventually, when she passes away, all the locals are in the hotel room waiting for her to die. And the moment she dies, they start taking her stuff. But it's culturally accepted that it's going to happen. Yeah. And Zorbas are kind of in there, like trying to hold the vultures at bay until they can't. They're very poor people. It's a very poor time. It's set, I think, just after the First World War, maybe second, I forget now. But there must be first, because it's written in at the end of the second. So it's an incredible scene. I always think about it, and it just makes me glum thinking about that bit where it goes 6 to 7, 7 to 8. I think, just let Madame Hortense die. Yeah. Just let her keep her jewelry to the last. Just blow the whistle. Just blow it. Just let her die with dignity before someone takes the bed sheets. Anyway, that's what I think about. What literary reference do you think about when teams get walloped? Maybe that's what that woman was reading in the stand. I don't know. Listen, we're nearly out of time here, but one final bit, Dunny, I did want to get your view on. And that was this Eghbali story. We spoke about this back in April on a show when Todd Boehly went into the dressing room, and at Chelsea this is.
With Mudryk.
And he was, and he had his say after a loss against Brighton and Hove Albion, and we spoke about should Nona go in, should they not? And Lampard said he was super cool with it. Of course he was. He was getting money for being useless. So of course he said, do whatever you want, mate. Just pay me. Pochettino has a slightly different issue right now, is that he is not being paid to be useless. He's being paid to rejuvenate Chelsea. And the story is really, really interesting. That Eghbali, who is I want to get the words right here for what his role is. He is the co-owner along with Boehly. So he's not like an understudy to Boehly, which I thought he was. They're actually both at the same level. Hold on a minute. Let me get it in my notes here to make sure I say it right. The co-controlling owner of Chelsea is Behdad Eghbali. He's not like a junior partner. So we're giving Boehly all this grief, and we should probably be giving a bit to Eghbali as well for how bad it's been. But he's been in the dressing room after games. Now, I listened to Simon Jordan on TalkSport on this, who, of course, owned Crystal Palace, and told a really interesting and funny anecdote about how he went into a dressing room once and was like, I didn't think the manager would have the balls to say what I thought needed to be said. I was about to sack him, and so I went into the dressing room and told Hayden Mullins and another player they were sorry, Tim, and had to buck their ideas up. It's an interesting story. I mean, Simon writes his own PR, so, you take all of it with a pinch of salt. But, part of it is that I'd love your view on whether it's their place or not. The fact it's happened again at Chelsea after the controversy in April. And also, the difference between going in pre-game, giving them a pat on the back and saying, get out there, Mikhailo, and give it a good game, to, when they've lost against Villa at home, it's their worst league start in over 40 years, Chelsea. off the back of one of their worst years ever, annus horribilis, as you would say in butchered Latin. What's he saying afterwards? It ain't complimentary, is it? So does Pochettino want him in there, and can he stop him coming in? What do you make to all this?
Yeah, so this is a really fascinating debate that I've heard for years, and the idea of, well, if you've spent this money, the owner has a right to say whatever he wants, which is, I think, to an effect true. But I would actually argue that you would go in before the game. You would go in right when the manager is finished his team talk, and you shake the hands of the players on their way out of the tunnel. That, to me, has more of an effect than going in post-game. Because then, if you win the game and you pop in afterwards and congratulate the boys, there's a weight to that, right? There's a psychology to that. But I also think it would be smarter for someone like, if I was in this situation, I chose to do this, if I was an owner, having been a player, I would want to show up right as the boys go out, shake their hands, good luck, blah, 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 have a presence, right? But not intrude on the manager and his pregame. And then I would go in after a win, shake their hands, congratulations, boys, well done. But I wouldn't go after a loss because I would want to create the atmosphere of them understanding that there's a bit of shame that comes along with the loss, right? So if I'm not there and I'm not present, you know why I'm not there, because you lost, right? You even a draw, you create like a sense of psychology around it. Because going in after a loss does nothing. Because I can tell you what happens, and I don't care how nice a person is. I don't care how much he spent on you. I don't care how much he's paying you. There's a moment where the guys look at each other, go, what the f*** is he doing in here? Sorry, Tim. I swear to God, that's exactly what happens. That's exactly what happens. Because these guys haven't been players. They're money guys. They're playing fantasy football. And the players themselves are in the trenches, whether they're playing well or they're not playing well. There's a sense of, who the f*** are you to walk in here right now? Sorry, Tim. That, honest to God, that's what happened. Especially if, as a player, you're invested in the manager and you haven't played well and you know things aren't going well, and this guy comes in and starts having a pop.
You're letting down the shareholders. Doesn't work.
Oh, my God, dude. I saw a moment as a player when a general manager came in.
Yeah.
And after a loss, and said something to the group. And one of the senior players stood up and says, "Get the f*** out." Sorry, Tim. Like, honest to God. I'm sorry. I'm going to curse because this is like, these are like, I can tell you this is what happens. Get the f*** out of here. Who the f*** are you? Sorry, Tim. Because you're not having it. You're emotionally drained. You know that you're struggling. You know that there's a bond, there's a click. As much as players might not like each other, as much as they might want to punch each other, there's still an us versus them mentality. There's an us versus them mentality to the coaching staff, but there's an us versus them mentality even more so to anyone outside that's not a part of that coaching core unit and that team that shows up every day and is pounding, grinding, showing up, killing themselves on the field, even when it's not going well, right? Because you can't take that away from them. As much as we can talk about they're not playing well, as much as we can talk about who should be there, who shouldn't be there, as much as we can talk about, well, he paid this much for the club and he's done this, so he gets a say. That's not the case. That's not reality. That's not a part of the mentality, because they are grinding each and every day to earn it. They're on the field. There's sweat equity. So when these things happen, I'm really intrigued to understand the dynamics of how this is, what's being said, what is it a rah, we'll get them next time, guys, or it's not fucking good enough, that type, sorry, Tim, that type of thing.
Because I follow up on the players?
Yeah.
Just because I want to squeeze this in. What happens if they're not doing that? Because I recognize what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense it would happen. What happens if Eghbali comes in, tears them a new one, tells them they're rubbish, or whatever he does? I'm just speculating here. And no one gets up and says, get out. What does that tell us?
It tells you that you're missing leadership inside the locker room. It tells you that you're lacking personality inside that locker room. And I'm not suggesting you need to be a dissident towards the owner and, puff your chest and, just come out flat out and, you need a guy to say like, oh, F you, bro. Like, but I mean, think about the Chelsea of old. And this is, and I heard this whole narrative and like the Chelsea fans didn't sign up for this and the Abramovich situation wasn't their fault. And now so I've heard all that stuff. But I go
You had
back
20
to
years to stop supporting Chelsea under Abramovich if you had a moral compass. You decided not to, so you can't find one now.
I think about if this situation, God forbid, had been when John Terry was in that locker room, Carvalho was in that locker room, Lampard was in that locker room, even a Drogba was in that locker room. Like, just to name a few. Because when you have such massive presence inside of a locker room like that, whether you liked them or you didn't like them, there's a sweat equity of leadership inside of that locker room and ownership of what's happening. And last year we were saying, well, there's too many new players, but you still had leaders. N'Golo Kante was a leader by performance. Jorginho was a leader by performance and presence. Thiago Silva was a leader by his voice, but also by his presence and his play. You know, you still had some big personalities. I don't know who I know Thiago Silva is the personality, but I don't know who else is the personality inside of that locker room. And maybe that's a part of the challenge right now for Mauricio Pochettino, is to understand, okay, we've got some great young dynamic players. Take away all the money, right? Take away all the money, take away the cost, all of that stuff. If you just look at the locker room based on the players themselves, you got a good group of players, but they're not a great group of players. And maybe they'll become a great group of players, but in the meantime, how does Pochettino make this group of players a great group of players and make them the Chelsea that we expect them to be? So with all of this tumultuous turnover around the club and inside the locker room, that's Pochettino's job, right? But now what is the influence? Because I just have a tough time thinking that a guy like Mauricio Pochettino is, I don't want to say going to allow an owner to come inside that locker room.
Going to welcome it.
He's not going to like it. I have a tough time believing that he's going to like Eghbali or Boli or anybody else popping in that locker room and, to Simon Jordan's point, saying what they got to say because no one else is going to say it. Because I'll tell you what, I guarantee you when Simon Jordan walks in that locker room back in the day, there's going to be plenty of players inside that going like, get the f*** out of here, bro. Like, shut the f*** up, get the f*** out of here. Sorry, Tim. There's a 3, trifecta.
It's a fascinating story, really interesting answer. And I think that the Simon Jordan angle of it is interesting too, in terms of what Pochettino does, what the players do. And I think that response makes a lot of sense to me. But if they're not doing it, what does it say about Chelsea? We're out of time, but I just want to read this before we don't commit it to one of the programs. In terms of just how bad Chelsea have been, there's loads of stats doing the rounds out there. Worst start in 45 years, all that. But this one on the BBC this week, I thought was really interesting. Next week, we are at the 1-year anniversary of Graham Potter getting the job at Chelsea, 1st of October, 2022. In that time, full year of games, 38 played, 37 in terms of Man City. They won 29 games in that 37 games in the league since that date and got 90 points. Arsenal, 37 games played, 24 wins, 80 points. Nottingham Forest, for a more relative figure, 37 games played, 10 wins, 41 points. Chelsea, 38 games played, 9 wins, 39 points. That is around about £100 million of expenditure per win.
Yeah. I mean, to build on that, I saw something that said Enzo Fernandez has 3 wins in his Chelsea career. Been a part of
the YouTubers love him though. That's the important thing.
I mean, he's a good player. He's a good player. I think he's a good player. But
it's right player, right team, right league, right time. It's all that stuff, isn't it? You know, it goes to Sancho, it goes to Kai Havertz, it goes to all of it. Dunny, we're out of time. Always a pleasure, mate. Always enjoyed chatting to you. Where are you this week? Where are you off to?
I've got a double dipper. I'm going to be in Houston for the Texas Derby. Houston Dynamo, they play Inter Miami on Wednesday night in the U.S. Open Cup final. Will Lionel Messi play or not? But Houston Dynamo at home, Texas Derby against FC Dallas on Saturday. Sunday morning, first flight out to Los Angeles. I've got LAFC against Real Salt Lake. So I'll be with Max Bretos on Saturday. I'll be with Kevin Egan on Sunday. And then I'll be back home on Monday morning. So I've got my notes. My notes are finished. I'm good. I'm ready to go for the weekend. What about you?
Well, don't forget to mention to Kev that if the WWE ever come to London, we're friends. I'd love to be on camera. They'll think it was Jason Statham in the background behind Michael Cole. I'll be doing, don't laugh at that. I'll be doing Tottenham-Liverpool for Premier League Live talks with the international team on Saturday alongside our friend Kevin Watson, the former Tottenham midfielder who's a top guy. And on Monday, I'm either going to be doing the commentary of Fulham-Chelsea or I'm going to be at Craven Cottage with a couple of friends of mine getting drunk and watching the game. So I'm not sure yet. We're a little bit early in the week to decide. But either way, I'm going to be across Fulham Chelsea, which means next Tuesday when we record, we could be talking about Pochettino being sacked and me being there, which will be super
Crazy.
funny. We will see. This is the Week in the Tackle podcast. If you enjoyed the program, leave a review, 5 stars, whatever you can. And do tell your friends about the program as well. I'm Tom Rennie. That is Brian Dunseth. Tim Horsey produced the program. Sorry, Tim. We'll see you next week.